Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keeden Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. Hey everybody, so before we get started with the actual episode today, we did want to make an announcement. We have a Patreon page now. Yay!
Yes, we have a Patreon, and if you have ever known me and if you have ever claimed to love me, you will subscribe to this Patreon. There's so much fun stuff. You get to interact with us. You get to help pick some of our next topics.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And okay, so I'm not actually strong arming you and basically saying if you love me, you would subscribe. But
the people that subscribe love you more than the ones that don't.
Yes, that is all I'm saying.
That's what he meant.
I'm not saying you don't love me. I'm just saying that I know who loves me more. And so that's all.
There's cool stuff. So Bill's setting us up a Discord, which will take Keeden and I a little time to figure out, but it's a good place to be able to chat because we know a lot of times people love talking about this stuff. So it gives us all a platform to talk together. Like he was mentioning, being able to help us vote on different content and things. And also there's the ability if you want to maybe plan ahead. So, they're talking about something, but I don't really remember that movie or that comic book. It's been a while. The opportunity to get our recording schedule and our release schedule and that sort of thing. So you know what's going on. And also some fun behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, this is just, it takes a lot of time and energy, and it also does take a little bit of money for us to put this all together. So anyone who's able, we appreciate you helping us out to make this happen.
All right. So we're talking Riddler today.
Woohoo!
A very interesting but very awesome comic. Today, our topic is going to be Batman One Bad Day. And it's the Riddler's issue. So basically, last year, DC did a series of one-shots called One Bad Day, where they kind of did it. It was very reminiscent of the Killing Joke that gives like Joker's possible backstory. He has so many, so we don't know if it's legit or not, but it's that version's his backstory. And I think what DC wanted to do was do something reminiscent of that, but with all of the other iconic villains. So there's quite a few other ones that came out, but they're one shots and they're still longer than regular issues. They're probably like maybe it feels like maybe 2.5, 3 issues, but it's
It feels like, when you've got just a handful of issues that create a storyline. It feels like one of those.
Yeah, it's a really good one shot, but it's written by Tom King, so the dialogue in it is phenomenal.
We knew we were gonna love it. Tom King, come
immediately. On. Yeah, Tom, if you're listening to this, we're huge fans, and we would love for you to come on the podcast anytime you want. Tom King therapy, whatever. Let's do it.
Yeah, he's so good. So good. Like you said, we knew the dialogue was going to be on point.
He is. And Riddler's always been one that's really interesting to me just because he is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. Like some storylines, he was a forensic scientist before he became a serial killer / Batman villain, and so he's always
before he got distracted with other things,
right? Yeah, it's before he had one bad day, right?
There you go.
And so these one shots, I don't believe they're all like necessarily canon because there's so many. Like I said, there's so many different origin stories. It depends on who the writer is, but I really loved this just because once again, it's showing how childhood trauma can
Mhm.
lead down a dark path, and this issue does some really, really different things
It does. Well,
too.
and that's the thing with the Riddler that I find interesting. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you tend to know all the different source of materials better than I do, but his consistency is the intelligence and obviously the thinking further ahead using the whole Riddler thing, which they actually toy around with in the storyline, the fact that
Yeah,
he kind of switches it up. But I think one of the things that I find interesting that really varies is what what the tone is that he sets.
yeah,
So I feel like when I was younger, a lot of the storylines that were coming out, he's kind of this goofball. You had like the Jim Carrey style Riddlers, you
right.
know? But later on, I mean, with Zero Year and with this storyline, and it just seems like these more serious renditions of him have come out. And I think they're all very interesting. I like them all, even though they're vastly different.
Yeah, I'm not gonna well, it's and I think it's because, like, the modern, like, gritty
Mm,
Riddler, he reminds me a lot of, like, a serial killer where you would watch a true crime documentary on, like, he really
yeah.
like, some of the clues that he leaves and some of the stuff that he does is like, "Who is this guy?" It makes you think about things like BTK or Zodiac Killer, like those guys that
Mm,
like just left these clues, and it's like, okay, who is it? What is going on here? This is crazy. And you realize that in this issue, one of the things that shows is that it's all a game to him. Like it's
mm,
all just this game, and Batman's just his favorite because he's also good at his games. And he even says in the issue that it's fun
yeah.
for him.
Wait,
Yeah.
so I'm totally jumping toward the end and stop now if you wanna read it before before we
Yes,
ruin it for you.
definitely,
Stop
because
now.
it's so good.
But it's interesting too though, because 'cause you're right, he enjoys the game. There's actually a very Joker similarity there in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
but he kinda has more of a set of rules, I guess.
yeah,
But he enjoys the game, but in this comic, he goes, okay, I enjoyed the game, but I realized I'm always gonna win. This isn't a challenge, so let's just skip ahead to the end.
right,
And it's just like, "Oh, no."
right. It kind of reminds me of like when you have a hobby that
Mm.
you enjoy and then you just kind of complete it, right? Like
Ah,
it's like
yeah.
a like if there's a hobby and you're like like say for instance you're like your hobby is like fixing an old car.
Mm.
Right, and then you finally fix that old car and it's ready to go, and you're like, "Well, I guess I'll just post more pictures of it on
Yep.
Facebook," right? Like, he's like, "Okay, I've done it. I can do it all." And he does some crazy stuff in
He
this comic.
well, he dials it up a notch. He shows, "I've actually been holding back. You guys
Crazy as in
didn't."
outlandish. I've learned that that is not a good way to describe anything mental
Nice.
health related.
Yep. Well, and it's so interesting too because and he's not gonna be the only villain, I'm sure, that we talk about this
Right.
season that's like this, but he essentially shows just how much of an intelligence outlier he
Oh
is.
my gosh.
I mean, what are some of the things he does? He thinks 20 steps ahead of
Yes.
anybody. I mean, like what was and oh god, and then he didn't have any moral compass anymore because he was like, ah, I'm gonna win anyway, so it doesn't matter. So he kills all the crime boss spouses
Yeah.
so they won't go
Just
after it.
'cause. Just
It just
'cause.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, he knows which cops to go after before they, are actually gonna go against him. And I mean, he not only is he really smart, but he doesn't hold back anymore. It's a very frightening, it's just a very frightening version of him.
And you find out also he was the one that, gave Joker,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
the address in Killing Joke.
Yep.
Like, yeah, he's like, "Oh, yeah, by the way, I have all of this information," and he knows all the information about the guards, and their families. And so
Yep.
everyone's just kind of left in awe of him. And you find out though that he doesn't really he doesn't he it doesn't really phase him because of the environment he was raised in, where he was
Mm,
never smart enough. He was never good enough. No matter what he did, it was never appreciated because his father, who was the headmaster of his school, was constantly belittling him, emotionally and physically abusing him, all because he hated his mother.
yeah.
He
Yeah.
hated the Riddler's mom, who I guess was a sex worker, and this is a very recurring thing. People have no idea the impact they can have on young minds and
Mm,
children.
yeah.
And I found fault with the dad, of course. His dad, I
Yeah.
absolutely did not like him. But I'm not going to lie to you. As an educator, I was bothered by his teacher. So
Ah.
in the comic, Edward has a teacher that I guess it's an English teacher, and
Yes.
one of the questions on his test is always a riddle. And if you get it wrong, he actually takes points off for it.
Yeah, that's weird that it's not a bonus
Right.
question.
I hated that. And it
Yeah.
and it drove Edward it drove him to a very, very dark place because he would get every single question right, and then he would get the riddle wrong. And I'm like, but he studied and he knows the material that he needs to know.
Yeah.
A riddle should not be on oh my God, it irked me so bad because I would never, ever do that to a student where it's like, oh, sorry, you don't know the riddle, so you can't get a perfect score. Like, that's some.
Yeah, and I mean the the place that the teacher was coming from made sense, but I would agree that the way of going about it was flawed.
Right.
Because he did talk about trying to help them get to a point where you can't just rely on memorization and I know these facts and information and the black and white of childhood that you often can have. But there are ways to do that with the actual things that people are studying or doing it in ways that's not going to
Well,
essentially punish. I mean, it sounds like it was just a few points, but still.
and
And
yeah,
and now I would say that I know you don't agree with this teacher, but I'm assuming you don't think that the consequence for that should be your head getting bashed in on a basketball court.
absolutely not. But I would never make that test. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that teacher deserved what he got. But I also think that like there should have been a step in long ago because I can't imagine losing valedictorian because I couldn't answer a teacher's dumb riddle at the end of their
I
test.
didn't get oh, sorry.
I
So I didn't get valedictorian because I took theater, and theater isn't an AP class.
tisk tisk. You could have been great.
I started saying it and I was like, "Oh no, I'm going to sound like such a tool." But I started, so I can't
Could have
stop now.
you could have
I
been
could have.
great, but you
But I
decided
was
to waste
salutatorian.
time with
I
school
still got
plays.
to I know. I wasted time with the theater kids.
Yeah. And now you
I
have a
learned a
podcast, so it worked.
you know,
I think that relates. I think you did something
it
with that.
does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That has a lot more to do with that. I do a lot more with theater than I do with calculus.
There we go. There, oh
Yeah,
my god.
that's
Yeah,
true.
right, right. Okay. Yeah. All right. So
Back to the story.
yeah,
Sorry, guys.
I was completely bothered by that teacher, and I understood where he was coming from, but this is my issue, and it's something that I feel like educators run into quite a bit. It's trying to teach ideals and forgetting that you also need to teach real world,
Yeah.
right? Because that teacher, one of the things he was doing is like, oh, in an ideal world, you don't need to worry about grades and you don't need to do this. But it's like, okay, ideally, you're absolutely right. But
Mhm.
that's not where we're at right now. You teach at an insanely prestigious school where
Yeah.
grades are literally everything and can make and break
Yeah.
some of these students. Like, I get what you're saying, and that would be great. However, right?
Yeah,
And
that's fair.
it's kind of like when he was saying that, it kind of felt like when the person driving the Ferrari gets out of their car and goes, bud, money isn't everything. And it's like, get out of my face. I literally didn't buy a Gatorade today because I was like,
Yep.
I
Mhm.
need to save my money, right? Right? Like it's
But now
like
you're like, "I wish I had that Gatorade so I could
right,
pour it all over the
like a
upholstery in your car."
right, right. And it's one of those, and that's what it felt like when that teacher was doing that. Like, okay, listen, this kid's being abused by the headmaster, who is
Yeah.
his horrible dad. He does not want to hear, hey man, there's more important things in life. Don't worry about the bad grades. Have you ever played basketball? It's like, dude, stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Well, and it seemed like this teacher had a little bit of a sense, but also unfortunately what often happens, no idea of the full scope of what was really going on
Right.
between him and his dad. So
Right.
there was definitely that, hey, your dad's the headmaster. There's tremendous pressure for you. You're a super smart kid. Obviously, you're going to go far, but there's this added stress that, if anything, might be really tough for him, but also all this underlying stuff. And so, a lot of people actually talk about adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
And definitely what's going on with his dad, like you said, yeah, there's abusive stuff going on.
Yeah.
And just a lot of emotional, and I can't remember if they showed it, but they definitely alluded to physical abuse as well. I mean, kind of trying to make it see. I think he thought he was doing corporal punishment kind of thing, where
Mhm.
it's like I'm, teaching him a lesson, but it didn't really fit. Punishment didn't fit the crime, just like the
Absolutely not.
basketball stuff. So yeah, you're right. I mean, there was all this stuff going on underneath the surface, and I think a lot of times we think that if things are bad, it's going to be really obvious. But
Right.
unfortunately, a lot of times what actually happens is it just becomes so insulated,
Mhm.
and there's almost this like added protective layer around the outside where there are oftentimes you have no idea. Like that teacher could kind of tell there was some tension, but it did not seem like he was fully aware.
Right. I really that was one thing. It's like this comic was full of phenomenal things and great motifs, and it was just all this good stuff. And I got so annoyed by that teacher who took off 8 points.
Was it 8?
It was 8. He got a 92 on the test because he missed that riddle at the end. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, that's almost the whole letter grade." And that's like, come on.
Well, but here's the thing though is that this is actually it's kind of an example I relate to quite a bit, because for some people they feel so trapped within the system they're in and they don't see a way out that I mean this is obviously taken to the extreme, murdering the teacher on the basketball court, but I'm being punished in all these big ways and I don't see a way out. And then that's when people start reacting in these ways that you go, "What is you honestly, a lot of times you think, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah,
And a lot of times there's these things like this where um just this level of unfairness and the tensions build and you don't see an escape hatch anywhere. And then, you have all this other stuff going on, like with the family with this guy, and the straw breaks the camel's back, the 8 points of the riddle. And he even tried to cheat. And this is a kid who does not need to cheat.
right.
This is a very, very smart kid who seems to want to play by the rules. I mean, it took a lot for him to get to the point of trying to look up the answer. Then he gets busted. I mean, all these tensions layer on
Yeah, it just
top,
kept
and
getting
then,
worse and worse.
yep. And then he just broke.
Oh, gosh. At that point, and it's funny because it's still one of those things where he ended up overcorrecting because, of
Mm,
course, this is how he became the Riddler,
yeah,
right? Like, he's like, "Oh, you want me to answer your joke? Fine, I'll answer your joke for you." And that just became his
yep,
thing. That just became his whole shtick, and it was almost like Batman was cool with it because it was like, "Okay, I know your deal."
yeah.
I solve your riddle, nobody dies,
Yep.
and I break your arm and throw you in jail, right? Like that's just
Everybody's happy.
right. Everyone's happy. Everyone's happy, and it's fine. And then there's something in the Riddler that just kind of snaps,
Well, and then he finds out about his mom.
and he finds out about his mom, and it was really heartbreaking because he just goes to her and he asks her 1,000 questions, doesn't even give her a chance to answer, and then he kills her.
Mhm.
He kills her, and it's all this pent up rage. And what's so sad about it is at one point Batman goes to the father, and
Mm,
the father's not the least bit remorseful. He's
yeah.
he's not remorseful. He doesn't realize the error of his ways. In fact, he still thinks he's the hero.
Yeah.
And it just made me think about how often the people that negatively impact us the most aren't even bothered
Yep.
by what they did. And it's one of the sayings that I've heard is they're dogs that just bite. And I think it was also a line they
Mm.
used that the Joker used in the Dark Knight. He's like, I'm just a dog running after cars. Like it's just what I do. There's just some people that will just bite you, and it will completely ruin your day. It will can wreck your life. And in reality, it didn't bother them at all. Like they're
So
completely fine with it.
so here's the thing. Technically, all dogs that have mouths, which I think they would probably need the mouth to survive, can bite.
I promise I don't hate dogs.
Maybe there are certain dogs that, maybe if a dog has their jaw wired shut for some reason or something else, maybe those dogs can't bite. But technically, most, if not all, dogs can bite. There are a variety of different reasons that they might. And there are a variety of reasons that a dog could bite you, hurt you, and either not care or not realize that they hurt someone around, right? Like just taking
Yeah,
that analogy a step further. And the yeah, it's amazing how much we can do these like Olympian level hurdles in our minds to see the world a certain way.
yeah,
So there are a lot of different videos and things out there about like how do you debate someone and change their mind and how sealed our brains can get. And we oftentimes think of, oh, that person over there is delusional, because usually we're thinking of someone who maybe they think the CIA is watching them, or they think aliens have put a microchip in their brain or something like that. But and they get stuck in that, and they can't kind of see the information to help them see, okay, that isn't the likely scenario. But we all do it. We all get stuck in our ways and
yeah,
refuse to be moved.
absolutely.
And this shows how harmful that can really be, and also how unfair, because here is this story of someone and these adverse childhood experiences, this direct harm his father did. And here's the tricky thing for a lot of people with trauma, or even things that don't end up trauma level but are particularly hurtful to
Right.
us. It can be really hard to move on when there's not that acknowledgement for one reason or another.
True.
And the Riddler, one thing that is clear, his father is never going to acknowledge his role in the hurt that led to the Riddler.
Right.
And that reverberates out.
Yeah.
It reverberates out
It's
in
horrible.
in him becoming the Riddler, this reality of being stuck. His dad's lack of acknowledgement probably led to the hatred he has for his mother. It's reverberating out in all these ways, and it really is a way that folks with trauma in particular, when it gets to that level, you can just get really stuck because it can be so hard to not get that validation. And like you said, though, it usually doesn't impact the other person the way it's impacting you, and that part often really really hits hard.
Yeah. And what the impact in this particular issue, it's funny because we're focusing on supervillains this season, but it's still like this what if scenario of
Mm,
what if the theatrics stopped and
Yeah,
a
that's
Batman
true.
villain just didn't have a gimmick, but was
Oh boy.
also ultra brilliant,
Yep.
right? And it was absolutely terrifying because I mean, some of Batman's villains don't, even though their gimmick isn't heavy, they're not
Mm,
nearly as brilliant. Like Victor
right.
Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is simply
Yeah.
serial killer, marks himself every time he get takes a victim, right?
Yeah.
But he's not this brilliant person. Batman normally finds him in a corner, breaks both of his arms, throws him in jail. That's his thing.
P.S. Zaz is not on our list, but what an intriguing villain. We may need to add him.
Yeah, he can be intriguing at
I
times.
mean,
He's like I said, he's like
I
that's
mean,
his thing though. Like that's it.
but psychologically,
Yeah, yeah, it's just yeah, he's that's true. That's I'll give you that. Yeah, we can do a case study
you're
on
not
Victor's
convinced.
ass.
You're not
I'm a little
convinced. We'll
convinced.
talk. We'll talk about it. We'll
We
see if
can
it's
put
worth it.
Victor's ass where we had Star Trek.
Rude. Rude. Are you seriously going to do this every episode this season?
Nope,
Every episode this season, you're going to find a way to.
nope, nope. This is
back
not
to
this is not a Star Trek bullying podcast.
back to the Riddler. Thank you very much. So you were mentioning that this is kind of hitting on a what if. Like, what if you had this spin and the limits were taken away, the rules were taken away. And what's
Right.
interesting too is I love in the end, Batman goes, well, the only way to beat him is to no longer follow my rules. And
Oh
so
my
essentially
gosh.
alluding to
Yeah.
him killing the Riddler. Oh,
Yeah, because you find out that basically because at the beginning there is a murder, and what
yes.
they're trying to figure out is why Riddler did it because that's his whole thing. It's like
Hmm.
it's a riddle to solve, and the big reveal is he did it randomly
Hmm.
because no more riddles, and it was just to prove a point to Batman, like, hey, I can just kill people at random and you will not be able to save them because I'm thinking 30 steps ahead of you.
Well, and also, if you do anything
Yes, if you
to
do
stop me,
anything,
I will kill a random
if
person.
you watch me, if you have police surveillance listening into me, like he's
Hmm.
thinking like 30 steps ahead of everyone. And it's phenomenal because it's like, man, I knew he was good, but I didn't know
I
he
know.
was this good. And at one point, he even talks to Batman about, like, yeah, I went to your house a couple times. I
Oh
snooped around there. I broke in. I saw your mom's pearl that you saved. That's crazy.
But didn't he
Yeah,
also say like I saw that stash of money? I took $1 bill, so now you know what happened to that because I'm sure you noticed.
yeah, yeah. It's just it's one of those things. And as he's talking, he's like, for a while we did have fun, and you were
Yep.
good, and I enjoyed it, but I don't enjoy it anymore. And so I'm just going to live my life and you're not going to touch me. And anyone that gets in my way, I'm going to murder him. I'm going to kill him. And so the city is absolutely terrified
Hmm.
by this person to the point that Gordon can't keep cops on the force.
Yep.
The banks are like, if you see him, give him whatever he wants. Like everyone's just living in fear of this man that's like 5 chess games ahead of the rest of the world.
Hmm.
And there is essentially only one way to stop him. And like you said, those rules that are in place have to be Batman has to break it. And it's funny because one thing about comic books that is very, very convenient for superheroes is there's a lot of the times there's hardly ever a shade of gray.
Mm,
It's one of the things people hated so much about Man of Steel because Man of
yeah.
Steel put in a position. It's like, okay, Superman, if you don't snap Zod's neck right now, he's gonna kill those people. Well, what
Yep.
are you gonna do? And the world went nuts because super and nuts in a comic book way. I That's not a real way to describe mental health. I'm gonna keep making sure I
I
stick
love
on
it.
that.
Look at you.
I'm gonna keep
Look
making
at
sure to
you.
stick on that. But yeah, they a lot of people lost it because they're like, "Oh my god, Superman killed someone. How could he?" And I'm like, "But did you don't get it? Like he was in a situation and he couldn't stop it. And Henry Cavill's great. And like, see, like you don't get it. Like I defended it to the bone because I loved that they put him in this morally ultra
Mm,
gray situation, and
yep,
they put Batman in this situation, and they let you know, by the way, he can't even calculate his way out
yep.
of this one.
Well, and it was so interesting because and this happens to us as people. We all have our blind spots, and the interesting thing about the Riddler is I'm smarter than everyone else, which is true.
Right.
He's proving that as he goes along that he is in fact able to calculate ahead of everyone. I'm able to calculate ahead of everyone. I'm smarter than everyone else. I'm going to stop playing by the rules. But because he is smarter than everyone else and he's able to think ahead, he's making a false assumption that no one else is going to do the same sort of thing. And especially not, Batman, who he sees as having this higher moral ground. But yeah, it is very interesting. And one of the things too that is kind of sad about this is it does seem like once again, he had this opportunity to meet his mom.
Yeah.
So he finds out his mom's alive. He knew from the beginning, in not so nice ways from his father, that she was, she had sex for money. And ironically, though, they hint at the fact that he got his smarts from her,
Yeah.
which I just think like, oh, your dad's such an ass.
He's the
Um,
worst. He's
he's
the
the
absolute
worst.
worst.
But what's so sad for everyone is so he finds out about his mom. He goes to meet her, and he essentially tells Batman later that he had the opportunity to find out what happened and why she wasn't there and just find out things. And he was like, and I couldn't do it. Instead, I killed her. I killed her
Yeah.
before she had a chance to share anything with me. He couldn't handle it, and he took that opportunity away from himself, and it reverberated out so far that he said, I quit. I quit it all, and I'm taking everyone down with me.
And what's interesting about that is I want to know what the opposite outcome would have been. Would he have just
Mm.
been a happier Riddler, or would he have just given it all
Hmm.
up, right? If he had gotten the answers that he wanted, like what
I
would
don't
have
think he would have given up. I
right,
think he went too far down that path. That's a good question, though. What would
right? Like I wonder what would have
huh.
happened. Like would it have been one of those things like, huh, cool.
I think he would have
Maybe
been
I
a
won't
happier Riddler.
maybe I won't always wear green. Like maybe I'll change it up from time to like what would have happened there, right? Like I don't and it's because yeah,
Yeah.
I really don't think at that point he would have been like, "Oh, I'm going to change my ways." You know what? I'd make a great accountant. Right? Like I really don't think that's how that would have
No.
gone down.
But he turned harder. So I think if he had been able to do it, he would have gotten softer. I agree with you that he would still be the Riddler. He still would have gone through all of these things. Maybe eventually he'd get to a point where he sets it aside, or maybe he'd turn into more like a Catwoman
Right.
kind of character where it's like not cleanly good or bad. I could see it maybe going that direction. But it's also, what did he rob from himself in that moment? He
Yeah.
he essentially became his dad.
Oof.
And this happens where the abuser becomes so implanted in you that you almost end up abusing yourself by not on purpose,
Mhm.
but they're so ingrained in you. You start beating yourself up in ways that are similar. Like you're saying the same things to yourself that they said to you. It almost feels like he was essentially playing his dad's role of removing the potential for some healing, taking that out of the equation for him. It's sad.
And yeah, and the thing is, this entire issue is about what happens when there are no more rules. And it
Mm,
just, like you said, it reverberates because the Riddler suddenly has no more rules. So the cops working for Gordon suddenly have no more rules. They're shooting each other and all kind of chaos is breaking
that
loose.
was
And it was yeah, and so nothing is making sense, and it's all a ripple effect from him, almost just like this tsunami that keeps getting bigger and bigger. And what's
mhm.
even more heartbreaking is at one point the guy that was killed at the beginning, Bruce Wayne develops like a friendly relationship with the widow, and at one point he goes
Mhm.
and talks to her, and he just tells her, "Hey, your husband was the victim of one of Riddler's games that just went
Yeah.
wrong." And she's devastated because she's like, this isn't the way it's supposed to work. The way it's
Mhm.
supposed to work is you live in Gotham. These people break out of Arkham. Batman saves us and throws them back in Arkham. This isn't how it works. And I think that's what snaps something in Bruce that's
Mm.
like, time to change the game, because
Yeah.
more than anything, I got into this to keep what happened to me from
Yeah.
happening to anyone else. And the Riddler even makes a point of saying, "You're pretty simple, Bruce." Like, he's like, "By the way, first off, I know you're Bruce, whatever, but you're also very simple. Crime is bad. You stop it.
Mhm.
I lost my parents to violence. I can't let that happen to someone else." He's like, "You're simple. My life is a lot more complicated than yours." And so I love the way it's written. It's very dark, it's very bleak,
Yeah. We
and
love that.
it feels it feels more realistic. Like, this
Yeah.
felt closer to the Riddler that we saw in The Batman, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where he's
Yeah.
like, "I'm upset, I'm angry, and someone has to catch this. Someone has to catch this." But what's interesting is, and that was the Riddler from the Batman, but what's interesting about this Riddler is at the end of it, he seems almost content. Like, he just
Mm.
like, it's not even content necessarily, but he just wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
He just wants to be left alone, and I don't even know if he necessarily, if people had left him alone, I wonder if he still would have been killing or finding a reason to kill, just interacting with anyone.
Well,
But
and that's well, I think that's the thing though is he wants to be left alone, but he doesn't.
yeah,
He wants to be left alone.
yeah,
Because if he wanted to be left alone, he would have never gone to see his mom.
that's true.
And that's the thing, this like internal push and pull, because he he seems like someone who wants to connect. Why else would he have been playing these games for all those years with Batman? Why, like I said, why else would he even go to see his mom? Granted, didn't go the way he planned, but he didn't go there to kill her, or at least that doesn't seem like that was his initial motivation. But it's hard, and he's not getting what he needs out of those interactions, and so he's trying his best to
Yeah,
want to be left alone.
yeah, yeah. And so, gosh, I thought it was really interesting, that ripple effect. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I gotta ask, that teacher had just made those riddles extra credit. Where would we be right now? Where I'm just where how would it have gone? I know it would
Yeah.
have probably still gone bad down the line somewhere, but it wouldn't have gone bad there.
Do you think he would have, like, smart alecky done something to get that teacher because he found the riddles annoying, and then that teacher would have become the Riddler?
Ooh, there we go. There
There
we
you go.
go. We're gonna have to redo the what if.
There you go. There you go.
We're gonna have to fan fiction this thing. Let's do it. Because yeah, because I mean the thing too, because the it wasn't even the riddle aspect, it's the fact that he was gonna get reported for cheating,
Yeah.
because he cheated because he was just like, "I'm just gonna look up the answer to this riddle because I'm tired of being beat by my abusive father because of this stupid riddle." And I'm
Yep.
like, "Ugh." It's bad because I lost focus and focused way more on the teacher and his
Isn't
testing
that
systems and
interesting?
being
Yeah.
bothered by it as a teacher
Mhm.
myself. Um, I could not focus on anything but that, and then when he was like, it was the only one I missed and I got a 92, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I was just ugh, I could not believe the nerve of this teacher,
But
the
that's the
absolute
thing, though.
audacity.
What happened to you is exactly what happened to him,
Yeah,
where That wasn't okay, I'm not saying that's not a problem. Like, okay, someone should maybe, like, get that teacher to change what they're doing. I hear you,
Yeah,
I agree with it,
yeah.
and
If the test is on the
that
Count of Monte Cristo, there shouldn't be a riddle at the end.
but the thing is that maybe there are students who it's the difference between pass and fail, and then it leads to, whatever. But that wasn't truly the problem happening for him,
Right.
but it's it pulled his focus, which
Yes.
once again, this can often happen because the abuse, and I mean, that's his father.
Mhm.
He's a kid. He's not gonna see any escape from that, and by the way, he probably doesn't know there's something to escape,
Yeah.
because at that point, usually, kids are like, "Well, this is normal, right? This is just how family is." So, not only does he not know how to escape, but he probably doesn't even realize yet that, "Hey, this is wrong." And so, all of that pent up stuff and gunk building up
Right.
in him, it gets shifted and the focus ends up on the teacher, which I
Yes.
just love that this happened to you too.
Yes. Uh,
For different reasons, obviously, more like educator to educator, but still very interesting.
but a lot of times that's how trauma and horrible things work, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like
Hmm.
whatever happens to you, it comes out somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? It
Yeah.
comes out somewhere else where you get way too angry at being caught by a red
Hmm.
light, or
Yep.
you get way too angry at something a politician did, right? Like
Yep.
it's
Hmm.
something that ruins your day to the point where
Yep.
it's like, this is too much. It's like there's this trauma and I'm angry, but then
Hmm.
also they were out of glazed donuts today. And I'm gonna, this cashier is really gonna get it right now.
Yep.
And it's like,
Yep.
okay, that cashier did not deserve that, just the same way that horrible English teacher didn't deserve to die. Horrible teacher, yes. Deserve to die? Absolutely not. Right? And so yeah, it's one of those things where honestly, I will say you have to practice mindfulness, right?
There you go.
And just realize that, the horrible meeting with your boss is not your kid's fault, right?
Yep.
The late bill is not that cashier's fault, right?
Which actually you're hitting on a great point. We've been talking about trauma because that's what he experienced, but it can happen in these smaller ways too, where
Mhm.
absolutely things kind of transfer, and you're focused on holding it together with whatever it is that's causing a problem. But you're not focusing on holding it together when this other random little thing happens somewhere else. And so that's where it comes out.
Mhm.
But absolutely, and you're right. It is a good reminder, and mindfulness is a great way of pausing, stepping back from yourself, kind of observing, "Whoa, what's going on with me, and where might all this stuff be coming from?" And then I also just want to put a plug for the trauma piece, which is trauma treatments do work. They're hard because part of also what creates these reverberations for people is the trauma piece is really hard, and your brain and your body is having all these reactions to it. And the last thing you want to do is want to have to live with all that trauma stuff more than you already do. So you try and shove it in a closet usually. And the problem is that the closet starts getting stuffed and stuffed and stuffed until things are just kind of like falling out of it just in your everyday whatever. And so what you need to do is open the closet and essentially go and face what has this trauma done to create these issues I'm having in life. But
Yeah,
there's a number of different treatments that are very effective for this sort of thing, that I'm just throwing it out there because there are people that are listening that probably are really connecting to some of the things we're describing about this.
yeah,
And there are ways that you can talk to someone to help you sort through that so it's not happening for you anymore.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I really loved this issue. It was really good, and yeah, it just when I we always talk about how we love Tom King. I think it's because he's just good at making you think. Like it's one
Mm,
of those things. Like after you read it, you're not even necessarily thinking about Batman. You're like relating it.
yep.
It's like, man, like I really, really. enjoyed that. So I do have to ask before we wrap here, as far as him being a villain goes, with
Mm,
our villain theme, I still definitely think the Riddler is quite villainous. Like, even though we
mm.
saw why he is the way he is, it's like, no pass. I'm gonna say no pass for that.
Great question. So there's this delicate balance or thin line between explaining why we do the things we do and excusing the things we do.
Very true.
And those are different things. So we're seeing all these things that help explain what happened for this character. And I would agree he is fully aware and culpable of his own actions, and they are quite frightening.
Right.
And he's essentially closed his emotions and feelings and connection to other people. He's closed those off more and more and more. Is it because of trauma? Yes. Does that mean he's not responsible for his own actions? No. He's still responsible for those things. And oh boy, is it scary.
Yeah. And one other thing I was gonna ask about, his dad, he was, like, in the middle of nowhere hiding in a cabin. I take it he's been just basically living his life off the grid, hiding from Edward. Is that what you picked up on? That's what I
Maybe.
picked up on.
I mean, that wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. I think and they definitely alluded to him just drinking himself to death
Right, but at the same
slowly
time,
over
I don't
time.
buy it because I'm like, if Batman could find you,
Oh, yeah,
surely
his son could totally
in
find him.
this day, yeah, in this particular Edward Nigma could definitely find you, right?
Yeah. I don't know if he's hiding so much as not caring anymore about anything. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's an interesting question. Yeah. Who knows where dad lies at this point, but
yeah.
it's too bad he doesn't take more credit for the terrible things he did.
I don't think we gave too much away about this one. I think we talked about it enough that I really hope people go and buy it. Like I said, it's a
Yeah.
one shot Batman, One Bad Day, The Riddler. I think the name of the issue itself is Dreadful Reigns, like Reins. And so, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely check it out and
I would
definitely
agree.
get treatment for your trauma.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keeden Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.